Hey guys, tonight we slip off our shoes and step into a world where beauty means pain. Real, bone deep, daily pain. You're in a dimly lit opera hall in late Qing China, incense curling like ghosts in the rafters, silk rustling as women glide past you, their every movement a calculated effort. One noble woman catches your eye, not for her face, but for the way her steps barely disturb the floor, as if she floats. Her embroidered slippers are the size of a teacup, and inside them, something you probably wouldn't survive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. I read everyone. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit in the back row, the faint warble of an erhu trembling in the air. On stage, a performer plays the role of a courtesan, her tiny steps mincing across the floor in slow, painful grace. But it's not an act. Those feet are real, broken, curled, reshaped in childhood until they fit into shoes no longer than the length of your palm. The opera isn't just art. It's propaganda for beauty, for discipline, for status, and for pain. This isn't a quick trend. Foot binding has been around for 1,000 years. Some say it began in the 10th century when a concubine of the emperor danced with feet bound like crescent moons. Others argue it evolved slowly, merging with ideals of Confucian obedience and Taoist sensuality. Historians still debate whether the origin was courtly imitation or private fetish, but by the time you're born into this world, it's just something girls do. You're born into a respectable household, maybe not noble, but certainly not peasant. Which means one thing for certain, your feet must be bound. Your father doesn't talk about it. Your mother? She's already picked the cloth ribbons. You're maybe 5 years old, still plump with baby fat, chasing dragonflies in the courtyard. And one day, the games stop. You're summoned inside. There's a basin of hot water, herbs floating on the surface like drowned butterflies. Your mother speaks softly, too softly. That's when you know it's bad. The first step is the soak, warmth that lulls you into thinking this might not be so terrible. She gently washes your feet, humming. Then comes the clipping of the nails, very short, and then the cutting. Small slices along the toes to let out blood and bad spirits. Or so she says. You twitch. She hushes you. Then, the bending begins. She folds your 4 smallest toes under the sole, leaving only the big toe straight, and wraps, tightly, round and round until your foot is shaped like a crescent moon. You scream. She keeps going. The first binding always brings tears. And your mother? She weeps too, but keeps winding the cloth. She tells you this is how you will marry well. This is how you'll earn respect. This is what makes you valuable. And maybe, just maybe, she remembers her own first ribbon and how her mother's hands didn't tremble the way hers do now. That night you can't sleep. The pain pulses through your bones. You beg to take the wraps off. She doesn't answer. Eventually, the throbbing becomes part of you. Familiar. You shift under your blanket, careful not to bump your feet. By morning, your feet are swollen, the cloth stiff with blood. You hobble to the wash basin, supported by your mother's arms. And when she unwraps them, you wish she hadn't. Your toes are bent at impossible angles. One has turned purple. The rest look bruised, raw. You try to stand and fall, like a baby learning to walk again. This is your first step toward womanhood. Your grandmother watches from the doorway, nodding approvingly. Her own feet are even smaller than your mother's, barely 3 inches long. She tells you that her feet won her a merchant husband who owned a spice warehouse. That small feet bring big futures. Outside, in the alley, you hear the neighbor girl laughing. She hasn't been bound yet. Her father's a scholar, and he says the practice is outdated. You hate her a little, you envy her even more. A few weeks later, you see her again, this time limping, her eyes red. Her bindings began 2 days ago. You nod at each other across the courtyard. No words needed. You both understand now. There's something terrifyingly communal in this shared pain. You aren't alone, but that doesn't make it easier. Back at the opera, the noblewoman finishes her performance. She steps behind the curtain. Her maid rushes in, kneels, and removes her slippers. Her feet are pale and misshapen, bound so long they look like hooves more than human limbs. You watch as she exhales in relief, flexing what's left of her toes. The emperor once said, "A woman's virtue is measured in silence and step." Meaning, you're praised for walking without noise or complaint, even if each step feels like a blade sliding into your heel. Outside, the city is alive with paper lanterns and street vendors. You pass a stall selling tiny embroidered shoes, no longer than your palm. Red ones for weddings, blue ones for spring, black ones for mourning. You wonder how many feet had to break to fill those shelves. And just like that, you realize beauty, here, doesn't walk, it suffers. Morning returns, and your mother's hands are already soaking the binding cloths in the herbal basin before you've even opened your eyes. You know what's coming. There's no pretending anymore, no whispered reassurances, just the sound of the water dripping from her wrung-out rag as she beckons you forward with a quiet nod. You sit on the stool with your feet dangling like a marionette's. The cuts from yesterday haven't healed, and your toes feel like they belong to someone else. Still, she unwraps them with care, though not slowly enough to avoid reopening the scabs. You wince. She doesn't pause. Today is what they call the second winding. The one where the bones, already cracked, must be encouraged to break cleanly. It's not enough for the toes to curl under. The arch must also fold in on itself, the foot squeezed until it bows like a crescent moon, crushed between the past and your future. She bends the ball of your foot downward, pressing it in while folding the cloth tight. Tighter, tighter. You gasp, but she doesn't stop. A clean break is a better break, she says. It means less pain later, as if any of this is about reducing pain. There's a strange sound, a crack, soft but unmistakable. Your mother flinches, then exhales, as if something right has just happened. Your body goes limp. Afterward, you lie in bed, eyes wide, sheets bunched in your fists. Your feet pulse like they've been set on fire. Every heartbeat is a drum pounding inside your skin. You don't scream anymore. There's no point. The walls already know. This continues for weeks. Each morning, unwrap, clean, inspect, rewrap tighter than the day before. You develop a rhythm, even a kind of pride. When your cousin visits and compares her bindings to yours, she huffs. Your arches are collapsing better than mine. You smile, even if you want to scream. Misery loves measurement. You start to understand that in this world, beauty isn't a gift, it's a project, a job, a lifelong occupation that begins before you even understand it and ends when your body gives out. Historians still argue whether most girls went through their bindings willingly or by force. Some say girls begged for it, wanting to be like their mothers. Others claim it was fear of being unmarriageable that broke their will before their bones. What's certain is this: by age 7 or 8, you know not to complain. You try walking again. This time, your body trembles just from shifting your weight. It's like stepping on glass with every movement. You lean on walls, on furniture, on other girls. You fall a lot, but eventually, you shuffle, short, hesitant steps that drag the silk hem of your robe in time with the pain. A servant girl snickers as she passes you. She wears shoes as wide as dumplings, her feet unbound. You envy her stability, even as you remind yourself she'll never marry above her station. Her feet touch the ground too confidently. By your 9th birthday, the real test comes. You're brought before the family elders, lined up like stone statues in the ancestral hall. Your grandmother squints down at your slippers, small and embroidered with red chrysanthemums. She raises one eyebrow and gestures for you to remove them. You hesitate, just a second too long. Your mother nudges you gently. You slip off the shoes and reveal your feet. They've blistered, bled, and hardened into a new shape entirely. The toes folded beneath have fused against your sole. The arch is unnaturally high, and the skin has grown rough, almost calloused from friction. Your grandmother nods. "Golden lotus," she murmurs, "the highest praise." They say the perfect foot is just 3 inches long. A golden lotus. 4 inches is a silver lotus. Any longer, and you're lucky to snag a merchant's son. Some say imperial concubines were measured by foot length before face or fortune. Whether that's truth or exaggeration, you don't know. But it's enough to make you weep with relief when your grandmother approves. The next day, your mother gives you your first real pair of lotus shoes, hand-stitched silk, padded with cotton, and painted with tiny birds in flight. You feel the absurd irony. Shoes made for feet that cannot walk properly. She helps you put them on. They're impossibly small, smaller even than your feet, but that's part of the point. The tightness presses the bones together, keeps the curled toes in place, and ensures your foot doesn't dare revert. You try to walk. Your heel hits the floor first, and then the front follows like the tip of a brushstroke. One slow, gliding motion. Your stride becomes an art form. Your pain, a canvas. From this moment on, walking is performance. Even the men begin to notice. Not your face or your clothes, but the way you move. They murmur about your gait, your slippers, the way your robes swish without a sound. One boy, the son of your father's friend, sees your feet as you sit in the garden. He turns red and stammers something about butterflies. You don't know whether to be flattered or nauseated. Later, you hear the maids gossiping. They say bound feet are aromatic and tender, that husbands cradle them like babies during love-making. One says her mistress's husband used to kiss her feet before kissing her lips. You don't quite understand what that means, but you do understand it's supposed to be power, even if that power comes from pain. The truth is, the smaller your feet, the less distance you can cover. You're not expected to work, not really, not in the fields, not in the markets. The world shrinks to the size of your courtyard. The tighter the binding, the more you're admired for your discipline, your virtue, your fragility, and fragility is the goal. The third break comes not with a scream, but with a silence so thick it swallows every sound in the room. You're 11 now, old enough to know when your body is about to betray you. Your mother wraps your foot with the usual ritual, warm soak, trimmed nails, a brush of camphor oil to protect the skin, though you both know it barely helps. The cloth is newer this time, tighter, less forgiving. Your toes, already curled under for years, are beginning to resist. They've grown stubborn. So, she pushes harder. The arch is forced higher. The ball of your foot compresses. And with one brutal tug of the binding ribbon, something deep inside your foot gives way. You hear it. A wet, dull pop. Like stepping on a steamed dumpling. You don't scream. You don't move. But your mouth opens in a silent gasp, and tears streak your cheeks without invitation. Your mother stops. She looks you over, then resumes winding, as if the sound meant progress. In her mind, it does. This is what it takes. It's strange what you get used to. The ache becomes background noise. The numbness in your outer toes is now constant. In fact, you can no longer feel them at all. They're still technically attached, but they belong to a part of your body you no longer visit. They're dead weight. Beautiful. Bound weight. When you sleep, your feet twitch. Sometimes you dream that you're running, barefoot, fast, free, but you always wake with a jolt, tangled in your bedding. Your feet aching from the impossible idea of movement. You develop a limp, but you're told it's elegant. The shuffle, the stuttered steps, the small inward roll of your ankles, they've become part of your charm. You glide through the courtyard like steam over rice. Every movement controlled, every pace a quiet performance. Girls with unbound feet stride like farmers. You float like a wife in waiting. Pain is still your daily companion, but it's no longer dramatic. It has settled in like an unwelcome tenant you've learned to ignore. Infections come and go. You use vinegar compresses, salt soaks, powdered alum. One toenail blackens and falls off, another turns green, and you hide the smell with perfume sachets sewn into your slippers. You've learned to walk without heel pressure, just toes, or what remains of them. Your shoes must be changed every few months. Your feet shrink slowly, bones compressing further with each rebind. You craft your own slippers now, choosing silks and stitching tiny cranes or mandarin ducks onto the sides. It's not just embroidery, it's identity. Girls compete over designs, not comfort. One cousin embroiders hers with phoenix feathers and rice grains so fine you need to squint to see them. Her father weeps with pride. You begin to understand that your worth is now partly measured in inches, not of height or waistline, but of foot length. The ideal golden lotus foot is just 3 Chinese inches, or about 4 modern inches long. Most women never quite get there. But you're close. Close enough that aunties in the market pull your mother aside and whisper about matchmakers. Sometimes you sneak peeks at your father's ledger, the list of suitors whose families have made quiet inquiries. You recognize some names: sons of textile traders, an apothecary's heir, one scholar's son whose poetry you secretly admire. You never speak to them. Girls like you don't speak to boys. But your feet speak louder than your voice ever could. Historians still debate whether most families bound their daughters out of tradition or ambition. Was it truly for beauty? Or was it a weapon, an economic tool in the marriage market? Maybe both. What is certain is that bound feet were not just fashion, they were currency. And you, barely a teenager, are already being appraised. Your mother takes you to a visiting fortune teller. He's old, with hands like tree bark and a laugh like dry leaves. He doesn't ask your name. He asks to see your feet. You blush, but obey. He inspects the soles, nods at the curvature, the symmetry. He mutters something about strong bones and good fortune. Even as you wince from the pressure of his fingers, he writes a few words on red paper, folds it thrice, and tells your mother to place it under your pillow on the full moon. Your husband will have a noble face, he says, and, perhaps, a concubine or two, but none with feet as fine as hers. You're not sure how to feel. Your younger sister has begun her own bindings now. She cries more than you did, and it's hard not to feel smug, or maybe cruel. You want to tell her it gets easier, but that would be a lie. It doesn't get easier. You just stop noticing the difference between pain and normal. She asks why the boys don't have to bind their feet. You almost laugh. You almost cry. You don't answer. There's a festival in town, and for the first time, your mother allows you to attend, not the dusty outer lanes with puppet shows and sweet cakes, but the inner gardens, where merchant families stroll and size each other up, where marriages begin. You wear your best slippers, silk with red plum blossoms stitched along the outer edge. You walk slowly, gracefully, like a drifting lotus leaf on still water. You don't stumble once. An older woman watches you from a shaded bench. She leans in and whispers to her daughter, then gestures toward you. You don't need to hear the words. You know what she's saying. That girl walks like a nobleman's wife. It's summer now, and the heat sticks to your skin like honey gone sour. Flies hum at the edge of the kitchen where vinegar soaks and medicinal herbs lie drying in bamboo trays. Your feet are infected again, second toe on the left foot, the one that never healed. Quite right. There's a strange, almost sweet smell in your slippers that you don't tell your mother about. You already know what she'll say. Soak, dry, wrap. The cure is always the same. So you lift the corner of your shoe and peek. The skin is blistered. Yellow pus leaks from a split along the side of the toe. You gag quietly and press it shut with a clean rag. You've been through worse. At this point, the line between your body and the bandages has blurred. You step outside. Shuffle is more accurate. Your walk now relies on muscle memory and willpower. Each stride presses your curled toes further against the sole of your foot. You've developed a way of leaning forward from the waist, letting gravity guide you while your legs move like hinged sticks. Still, you try not to limp. Limping is ungraceful. Pain should never show. You pass a cluster of other girls near the well. All of them are dressed in light summer robes, hair pinned back with coral or bone, hands folded modestly. They're all bound, though at varying degrees. One girl's feet are smaller than yours, but her gait is jerky, uneven. You know she went too far too fast. The skin between her toes split months ago and never resealed. Everyone knows. No one says it aloud. You sit on a bench under the shade of a fruit tree. The air is thick with the scent of ripening lychees and camphor balm. You pull your slipper halfway off to let the wound breathe. When you glance up, one of the older girls has noticed. She doesn't smile, doesn't nod, just lifts the hem of her robe, enough for you to glimpse her own bandaged foot. It's worse than yours. 2 toenails gone, and her arch collapsed. The bandages are dyed red from old blood, and there's mold creeping into the edges of the cloth. You look away. That's the unspoken pact between bound girls. We witness, but we never comment. At home, your aunt arrives unexpectedly from a nearby province. She brings gifts, dried apricots, polished combs, and a new pair of lotus shoes embroidered with silver thread. They're beautiful. You slip them on. They're too tight. That's intentional. Smaller shoes encourage more compression. You hide your wince and thank her. That evening, she sits you down and tells you stories about when she was your age and her second toe turned black. She says she bit down on a bamboo stick to stop from screaming while her mother poured boiling wine over the wound. She laughs like it's a tale from a past life. Still got a good husband, she says, sipping tea. He bought me a maid just so I wouldn't have to walk to the market. You imagine a life where you never have to walk again. It sounds both divine and disturbing. Historians still argue how many infections from foot binding led to serious illness, or worse. Some claim the death rate was minimal. Others say sepsis took more girls than we'll ever know. The records are quiet on that front, perhaps deliberately. You get your period for the first time during this season. No one explains much. You're handed cloth rags, herbal tonics, and strict new rules about where you may sit. But something shifts. You're no longer just a child. You're a bride in preparation. And now, even your bleeding is part of the ritual. The foot binding becomes even more focused. Your mother starts wrapping your feet twice daily now, adjusting angles, compressing the bridge to create a more dramatic curve. You can't help but cry out one evening, and she hushes you with surprising tenderness. I cried too, she says. We all do. That night, your fever spikes. Your foot is hot to the touch, the infected toe swollen and purple. Your mother unwraps the bandage and frowns. The skin is slick and shiny, the nail bed oozing pus. She looks around the room and whispers, "We may lose that one." You go very still. She doesn't mean your foot. She means your toe. She boils a small blade in rice wine. You don't remember much after that, except the sudden, sharp flash of agony and the taste of blood in your mouth. You bit your own lip to keep from screaming. The next morning, you have one fewer toe on your left foot. No one says anything. The bandages are rewrapped. Life continues. What surprises you most is that walking doesn't become harder. In fact, it's slightly easier. Less pressure on the toe means less pain. You almost feel ashamed of the relief. Some say that once bound feet began to rot. Women used fragrant powders or tucked flower petals between their toes. One story says a girl used ground sandalwood paste to hide the smell, while another wove mint leaves into her socks. Whether these are myths or just desperate workarounds, no one's quite sure, but you try the mint trick anyway. It works, sort of. That autumn, a new girl arrives in the village. Her father is a herbalist, and she has a bold way of speaking. She announces that she will not bind her feet because she wants to become a midwife and walk the countryside. The aunties laugh behind their fans. She'll never marry, they whisper. The girl doesn't seem to care. You envy her, but only from the shadows. Later, when no one is watching, you try to imagine your life with normal feet. You stretch your toes a little too far, just to remember what it felt like. A shock of pain shoots through your bones. You quickly stop. You stare down at your slippers. The embroidery is starting to fade. Your arch is higher now. Your big toes have begun to lean inward unnaturally, twisting with age even though you're barely 13. You don't know if that's progress or warning. Still, tomorrow you will soak, rewrap, and press harder, because there's no going back now. The slippers are yours to make now, not just to wear, to create. You sit cross-legged beside your mother in the late afternoon light, small scissors balanced in your hand, silk threads tangled like veins across your lap. The fabric smells faintly of camphor and chrysanthemum oil, freshly unfolded from the lacquered box where she keeps old wedding cloths and secret love letters. You're learning to embroider your own shoes, the first ones that will carry your name, your symbols. The ones your matchmaker will point to when describing you, long before your face is even mentioned. Your mother threads her needle and begins to guide you. 3 rows of clouds, she says. That's good luck, Murky. A magpie, near a plum tree. That means marriage is on its way. You don't ask why marriage and pain must always hold hands. As you stitch, your bound foot rests on a velvet pad, tucked neatly beneath your robe. The arch is aching again. The second toe, the one you lost, still throbs with phantom pain, especially when rain approaches, but you've learned to ignore it. Most of the time, what you can't ignore is how small these shoes are, even after years of compression, even after 3 breaks, 4 infections, and 1 toe gone. They still feel impossibly tight. 4 inches of length. Less, if you dare. Your last pair had crimson swallows stitched across the heel. These? Indigo silk with pale lotus petals. Symbolic, hopeful, maybe even defiant. There's pride in this work. Control. Your stitches are straight and confident. You're not allowed to choose many things in life, but this tiny piece of artistry is yours. When you're done, your mother praises your even lines, then lifts the shoe and turns it in the light. It's lovely, perfectly shaped, designed to conceal the horror within, a coffin lined with poetry. You wear them for the first time 2 days later. Slipping your feet inside is like squeezing into a secret. No one sees your wince. You walk across the family room with the slow, delicate glide you've been practicing for years. Everyone claps softly. It's a performance, after all. Your aunt whispers that your feet are as elegant as silk shadows. You pretend not to hear her, but you glow with the compliment. And that's when you begin to understand. These shoes aren't just decoration. They're armor. Historians often describe foot binding as a contradiction, an act of weakness sold as strength, or vice versa. Was it submission to male desire, or an expression of female artistry? The truth is tangled, and scholars still argue whether it should be read as a prison or a stage. You think about that sometimes. Especially at night when you take off your slippers and stare at what's left of your feet. In the moonlight, your soles are pale and hard, toes fused downward, your big toe straining outward like a claw gripping nothing. The skin is leathery, except for the callus on your heel that split open again from today's walk. Still, they look beautiful, in the dark, like something carved or sculpted, a tragedy dressed in lace. You've reached what the older women call the ideal shape. Your mother finally admits that no more breaking is needed. Just maintenance now, soaking, wrapping, the occasional trimming of dead skin. A part of you almost misses the ritual, the daily violence. It gave structure. It gave purpose. Instead, the focus shifts. Now it's about poise. stillness, grace. You're learning the lotus shuffle, how to glide forward using only your thighs, keeping your arms perfectly still, never lifting your feet entirely off the ground. A woman with small feet should not appear hurried. That would ruin the illusion. At home, you're praised for your quiet steps. In the garden, your father's guests glance up when you pass, pretending not to look directly at your feet, but always doing so. At gatherings, women inspect each other's shoes the way men study horses. One girl boasts hers are just 3 inches. You don't believe her, but you don't argue. The truth is harder to pin down than the stitching on your slippers. One evening, a traveling theater troupe arrives in town. They perform a tragic opera about a girl who falls in love above her station. You go with your cousins, sitting behind a curtain with the other women. Halfway through the show, the lead actress stumbles, only slightly, but enough to break the illusion. Her feet, tiny and embroidered, catch on the edge of her robe. Later, you overhear whispers. "Too big," someone says, "probably 4.5 inches." And just like that, her performance is forgotten. Back at home, your uncle's wife offers you a curious thing, an old photo, brought from the city by a merchant relative. It shows a bound-footed woman sitting beside a Western missionary. The foreigner is dressed in stiff black wool, unsmiling. The Chinese woman wears lotus shoes, her feet displayed like prized fruit on a stand. You stare at it. "She wanted to prove we were barbarians," your aunt mutters. "Sent it overseas to shame us." You don't know what's more unsettling, the missionary's cold gaze, or the woman's fragile smile, one that says, "Yes, this hurts, but I chose it. Or maybe I didn't, but it's mine now." That night, you lie awake and imagine being photographed like that, a strange man pressing a button, capturing your feet forever. Do you want to be remembered? Do you want to be seen? Or just understood? You've never looked at your feet the same way again. That old photograph stays with you, the woman with the careful posture, the tight shoes, the faint, resigned pride. You didn't sleep well after seeing it. Something about her reminded you of yourself, though you don't know if that's a comfort or a warning. So you begin studying, not just embroidery or the lotus shuffle, but the theory of foot binding. There is one. Your mother keeps a mirror tray in her chest, a curved, lacquered base lined with polished silver. It's used for inspecting foot shape, an old matchmaker's trick. She shows it to you one afternoon, placing your feet inside the tray as the sun catches the curves and shadows. You see your own reflection, distorted, bent, lovely in that tragic way only this world understands. She points out the features that matter. A high arch, that's important. It shows discipline. The foot must be crescent, not stubby. The heels should rest gently on the ground, not slap. And the big toe must be straight and strong. It's your anchor. She adjusts your foot slightly in the mirror. Your right foot is better than your left. See how the curve is smoother? You should walk with that side forward when you're introduced. You nod. It's strange how something broken can be studied like art. You begin noticing other girls' feet more consciously. In the bathhouse, you compare arches, heel spacing, even the slight bruising at the knuckles of curled toes. One girl has feet so tiny she can barely stand, yet she beams like a girl who's passed the Imperial exam. Another's feet are longer, maybe silver lotus at best, but her balance is impeccable. She dances during festivals. You envy her and also pity her. It's a confusing soup of emotion, beauty, pain, status, and resentment stirred into one. Historians have found entire manuals on lotus foot aesthetics, charts, diagrams, ideal measurements, some written in calligraphy so beautiful they could be mistaken for poetry. Did men write them? Did women? Scholars still argue over whose voices shaped the standard and who suffered for it. All you know is that now you are a student of the lotus foot, and it is a study. You practice walk-in patterns on the courtyard tiles, 8 paces forward, stop, turn, dip the chin, your balance improves, the pain becomes manageable, not gone, just filed under background noise. Your grandmother gives you a gift one morning, a carved wooden display stand. It holds a single pair of lotus shoes. Yours. It's time, she says, for the matchmaker to visit. Your heart skips. You've been waiting for this, and dreading it. The matchmaker arrives with a quiet clatter of beads and a notebook fat with rumors. She wears heavy rouge and leans on a cane, but her eyes are sharp. She examines your shoes first, doesn't even ask your name yet. These are yours? She asks. You nod. She picks them up, weighs them in her hand like fruit, then squints at your gait as you cross the room. You walk the way you've practiced, small steps, hips still, no sound but the soft whisper of silk on stone. She nods. 4 inches? 3 3/4? Your mother answers quickly. The matchmaker smirks. We'll say 3.5 in the listing. Modesty flatters. She takes notes. Name, birth hour, bloodline, dowry, and, most important, foot shape. She sketches a little curve beside your name. Good arch, she murmurs. You're dismissed. That night, you lie awake again. Not from pain this time, but anticipation. Are you excited? Afraid? Proud? You try to imagine your future husband. Will he be kind? Will he care about your feet? Or just what they say about your family? You remember stories told by the older girls about men who refused to touch bound feet, who found them grotesque. Others, though, were the opposite. Obsessed. One story tells of a man who had tiny slippers made of sugar and insisted his wife wear them before he nibbled them apart. You're not sure whether to laugh or vomit. The morning brings another lesson. You're invited to your cousin's betrothal ceremony. She's older by 2 years out, and her match is a scholar from a silk town upriver. You've heard he sent a poem praising her feet before they even met. During the ceremony, her shoes are placed on a lacquered dish beside the marriage contract. Her fiancé lifts one slipper gently, examines it, and smiles. It's all very delicate, very symbolic. You know she hasn't been able to walk more than 10 steps without help for months. But no one mentions that. Back home, you stare at your own slippers on the wooden display stand. You reach for them, trace the stitching, run a finger along the curved sole. Your mother says a good pair of lotus shoes can last through marriage, birth, and burial. You wonder which of those will come first. Later that week, you meet the first suitor. Not meet exactly. You are brought to the tea house under the pretense of accompanying your aunt, but you know he'll be there. You've practiced your entrance all morning. Your hair is perfect. Your robe the soft blue that flatters your skin tone. Your feet bound tightly in your newest pair, red silk with gold-threaded cranes. You enter with slow, measured steps. You don't look up. He sees you. You know it by the pause in his teacup. The brief silence before he says something polite about the weather. You don't answer. You smile. bow slightly, and walk to the next room. The message is clear. Did you see how gracefully I moved? That's all you need to know. You hear his mother whisper, "Yes, she's well trained." And just like that, you've passed the first test. Your marriage is not yet arranged, but you are being watched. The matchmaker returns more often now, always with a new fan, a new list, a new twinkle in her eye that says your feet are the talk of 2 districts. You overhear her telling your mother, "We must move quickly. Girls with less to offer are being snatched up by textile men. But yours, she's a golden lotus. You know better than to be flattered. Golden lotus is a shape, not a destiny. Still, the words settle like incense in your mind. Sweet at first, but lingering. You double down on everything. Your stitching becomes neater. Your walking, more fluid. You memorize poems about spring blossoms and recite them aloud as you practice the shuffle in the garden. A girl with broken feet must cultivate grace in everything else. And then, one afternoon, your mother takes you aside. You need to learn how to inspect shoes. You blink. Inspect? For his shoes, she clarifies. For signs of wealth, taste, whether his family really values tradition. She brings out a collection of old men's slippers, some embroidered, some plain. You examine their soles, their linings, the fineness of the thread. If he doesn't invest in his own shoes, she says, why would he value yours? It's absurd, and yet it makes perfect sense. That evening, you hear your father murmuring in the study, something about dowries and tea sets, something about the boy from the tea house. Your cousin leans in and whispers, "He's short, but his family owns land." You nod, pretending not to care. You do. Of course you do. You lie awake imagining a face you barely saw. Was he handsome? Would he carry you when your feet hurt? Or just expect you to endure? Historians still argue whether bound-foot girls had more control over whom they married. On one hand, their desirability gave them leverage. On the other, it reduced them to feet first, person second. As always, the truth balances somewhere on a knife's edge. Your own power feels delicate, like a slipper left out in the rain. Then comes a moment you didn't expect. You are invited to a private gathering at the home of a wealthier family. A display. Really, a soft competition masked as afternoon tea. Other eligible girls will be there, all bound, all dressed in their best, and all under the eyes of one particular mother-in-law prospect. Your stomach knots as you prepare. This isn't just about beauty, it's about composure, silence, the ability to charm without seeming eager. You wear pale green silk, your hair coiled into 2 perfect loops, and your new shoes, ivory satin, with a peony stitched across each toe. The pain is immediate. These shoes are your smallest yet. You had to shave the padding thinner and trim the curve tighter just to squeeze in. As your mother ties the final loop, your breath catches. "You'll be sitting most of the time," she says, "but you know better. There will be walking. There is always walking. The gathering is quiet, refined. Girls pour tea with trembling hands. One spills a drop. Her mother pinches her arm discreetly. You keep your hands still. You've practiced this. Then comes the stroll through the garden. Each girl rises and walks a short loop along the pebbled path, their movements as scrutinized as a calligraphy scroll. You wait your turn. When it comes, you rise slowly, gracefully. You take the first step, then the next. The pebbles are uneven, and your foot slips, but only slightly. You recover, glide, turn, bow, applause, soft as rainfall. Afterward, the mother-in-law prospect smiles at you. Exquisite control, she murmurs. You nearly weep. Back home, you remove the shoes and discover 2 new blisters and a torn callus. Your foot bleeds onto the floor. You mop it up silently. The next day, there's a gift basket at your door. Candied hawthorn, silk ribbons, and a roll of imported bandage linen. The message is clear. We saw your pain, and we approve. That night, you ask your mother, "Did you ever enjoy it? Any of it?" She looks at you for a long time, then says, "I enjoyed being praised. I didn't enjoy what it took." You nod. The room feels smaller than usual. You dream of the garden path again. But this time, your feet crumble beneath you, and your embroidered shoes fall apart in front of everyone. You wake with your hands clenched and your legs aching, even though you haven't moved. Morning brings another tightening session. You press your teeth together and let your mother rewrap your feet with the new bandage linen. It stings less. That's something. In the village, a new story spreads. One girl tried to unbind her feet. She claimed her husband didn't care, that he told her she could walk freely if she wished, that he even bought her real shoes, big shoes. The other aunties scoff. "He'll leave her. Watch." But secretly, the story ripples through the girls like warm water. Could it be true? Could a man love you more for the parts you were told to hide? You think of your own future husband, whoever he is. Would he love your face, your laugh, your stitching, or just your ability to suffer quietly? You don't know. No one does. But for now, you bind, because the slippers are ready, and the matchmaker returns tomorrow. The day you meet his family, you don't eat breakfast, not out of nerves, though there are plenty of those, but because eating makes your face puffier. Your mother insists. You're wrapped in cream-colored silk, hair lacquered into a high, polished knot, and your smallest, most delicate pair of lotus shoes, white satin with blue wisteria embroidery trailing along the arch. You spent hours sewing those vines, each stitch a quiet prayer that this will go well. When the knock comes, you move to the parlor and wait behind the beaded curtain, as custom dictates. He enters first, just a flash of robes and a glimpse of his posture. His mother follows. Her eyes are sharp, scanning the room before she even sits. You've been trained for this moment, the first time a mother-in-law candidate sees your feet. Your mother calls softly, "Come, daughter." You glide in slowly. Pain anchors every movement. You step forward, heel first, then toes, keeping your back straight, arms still. The shuffle is exact, deliberate, beautiful. You sit, you bow, you smile just enough to seem demure, not eager. His mother nods. That's a good sign. Tea is served. You've practiced this too. Your hands must not shake. You hold the porcelain cup with the grace of a girl who has never hauled water or chased chickens. Then comes the foot inspection. She doesn't ask outright. Instead, she gestures politely. Your mother lifts your robe hem a few inches to reveal your shoes. His mother leans forward, squints, smiles faintly. Lotus embroidery, 4-inch? 3 3/4, your mother answers. The older woman hums in approval. Rare. She asks a few questions. How many pairs you've made? If you still rap daily, whether your balance is good on stairs, you answer modestly. You do not mention the infection on your left heel or the open blister bandaged under silk. Those things are not for tea talk. Historians still argue whether this moment, the display of the bound foot, was more for eroticism or social proof. Some claim it was the equivalent of a dowry, others call it a purity ritual, maybe both. But right now, it feels like a job interview with blood-soaked shoes. The visit ends politely. She doesn't speak much. That's a good sign. Your aunt whispers. When they don't find fault, they're interested. You're not sure how you feel. You didn't even look at his face. That night, your grandmother brings out her wedding slippers. Over 60 years old, faded crimson with gold-threaded dragons. She tells you her husband never once saw her bare feet, not even during childbirth. He died thinking they were perfect. You ask. Did you want him to see them? She chuckles. Wanting doesn't matter. Tradition does. You go to bed wondering what kind of man he is. The boy, not the father, not the dynasty. Does he wonder about you? Has he heard your name or just your foot length? A week later, the matchmaker returns. The marriage is agreed. There is ceremony, of course, betrothal gifts, incense offerings, calligraphy letters exchanged between fathers. But what you care about most is the new pair of wedding lotus shoes you are expected to make. These will be placed beside the red candles and bridal bed, admired by dozens of guests. They have to be perfect. You choose red silk with the phoenix and peony motif, symbols of fortune and honor. The soles are made of tightly layered cotton and rice paste, shaped in a delicate inward curve. They hurt to wear, of course. You make them hurt more, binding your feet tighter at night, using wooden pads to press the arch even further in. Your skin splits, your heel bleeds. You keep stitching. The finished shoes are so small they could fit in your palm. You hold them against your chest, marveling at what you've made. You can barely walk in them, but they are exquisite. Everyone says so. You show them to your sister, who just started her own binding a year ago. Her feet are still wide, stubby. She looks at your slippers in awe. I'll never make mine that pretty, she says. You will. You lie. It just takes time. The day before your wedding, your mother helps you wrap your feet for the last time as a maiden. The cloth is perfumed with rose and camphor. She takes her time, layering it just so, adjusting the pressure until it bites just enough to remind you it's there. You will unwrap them again only once you're with your husband. It's tradition. Later, as the women of your family dress you in red, paint your lips, pin your veil, and tie the final silk ribbons around your ankles, you feel something almost like pride. You've passed every test. You've suffered without complaint. You've walked beautifully. But still, your stomach twists. Because tomorrow, someone else will unwrap those bindings. Someone who might not understand the pain they conceal. Someone who might expect beauty without realizing what it costs. That night, you don't sleep. You sit quietly by your window, your wedding shoes beside you on the sill. You press your thumb into their soft curve and wonder, will he think they're beautiful? Will he unwrap them gently? Or will he just step over them, never realizing they're the most fragile part of you? The morning of your wedding begins not with bells, but with tightness, not just in your chest, though there is plenty of that, but in your feet, which have been wrapped more firmly than ever before. Your mother wakes you before the sun and binds them herself. pulling each layer with careful strength. They must hold all day, she says. No loosening, no slipping. You nod. When you slip on the wedding slippers, those crimson phoenixes stitched with your finest silk, you feel nothing but pressure. Your toes are completely numb. That, at least, is familiar. You're carried most of the way. Of course, brides are meant to be lifted, covered, protected, but at the threshold of his house, you must step down and walk in. That's tradition. That's symbolism. That's pain. Each step feels like your feet are cracking all over again, but you smile beneath your red veil. Every eye watches your gait, the way you glide, the way your robes whisper. You've practiced this moment since you were 5. Inside, the house smells of sandalwood and dried plum. Red paper cuts of double happiness hang on every beam. His mother greets you, nods, and offers tea. You kneel, pour, bow. Nothing spills. Your feet throb beneath you, but you do not tremble. And then, finally, he enters. Your husband. You've seen him once before. Maybe. You're not sure you even looked. But now he's here, and he looks at you with a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. He's young as Emmo. And his eyes dart toward your feet first, just for a second, before meeting your gaze. He doesn't say much during the ceremony, but he does help lift your veil. His hands are gentle. That night, you're led to the bridal chamber. Candles flicker. Guests giggle and whisper just outside the door. The room is quiet. Too quiet. He kneels and unlaces your slippers. You flinch, involuntarily. Not from pain, but from habit. Your feet are not for touching, not even by you. They are objects of display, not intimacy. Still, he continues, peeling back the crimson silk. Your bindings are revealed, pale, tight, lined with embroidered thread and the scent of rosewater. He reaches for the first knot and pauses. Does it hurt? He asks. You don't know how to answer that. He undoes the bindings slowly, layer by layer. The air kisses your skin like something forbidden. Your toes, long fused to your soles, press upward with memory alone. The shape is grotesque, but only in certain lighting. In the candlelight, they are something else. A sculpture, a symbol. He doesn't recoil. Instead, he brings a basin of warm water, lifts your feet gently, and sets them in. The heat makes you gasp. It rushes over your bones like rivers through cracked clay. You don't know whether to be grateful or terrified. Afterward, he wraps your feet again, not as tightly, just enough to cover them. He sets them on a silk pillow before sitting beside you. Says nothing. It's kind. You fall asleep wondering if that kindness will last. Historians still argue what happened behind the marriage curtains of bound-footed brides. Some say the feet were never fully unwrapped, remaining veiled even in intimacy. Others say unwrapping them was the highest act of trust. There are poems about it, men comparing the act to peeling a lotus petal, delicate and secretive. You now know the truth lies somewhere between poetry and raw bone. Marriage life settles like ash. You are moved into the women's quarters. Your days become a rhythm of tea service, silk folding, embroidery, and careful shuffling. You rarely leave the compound. Your feet, though still bound nightly, no longer need the same severity. You maintain their shape with effort, but the worst of the breaking is behind you, or so you think. until winter comes. The cold turns your feet to stone. The joints ache constantly. The big toe on your right foot swells, inflamed by a new crack in the skin. You walk with difficulty, but you cannot show it. His mother watches you like a hawk. You cannot limp. You cannot wince. Do not dishonor the shoes you made, your mother once said, so you don't. You begin using cinnamon powder in your slippers to mask the smell of infection. You chew ginger to reduce swelling. You smear goose fat under the bandages, an old maid's trick to soften dry cracks. Some days are better. Some days you don't feel your feet at all. You glide through the corridors like a breeze, nodding to the other daughters-in-law. One girl has bound feet worse than yours, blackened nails, one toe completely missing, but she's always smiling. You ask her why. She shrugs. They can't walk away from you when your feet are broken. You don't know whether that's tragic or smart. Your husband turns out to be quiet, almost awkward, but not unkind. He brings you candied lotus seed in spring. He asks you to embroider his handkerchiefs with characters of luck. He never mocks your feet. Once, he even carries you through the snow so your shoes wouldn't stain. You wonder, in those moments, if you were lucky, if pain brought you something gentle, but you know not every girl is so fortunate. You've heard the stories, husbands who mocked, who laughed, who forced their wives to dance just to see them suffer. You thank the embroidery gods you weren't given to one of those, and yet, even in peace, your feet remain your prison. You can't run. You can't flee. You can't even chase after a dropped handkerchief without leaning on a pillar. But everyone tells you, this is the price of beauty, and you've paid in full. You used to imagine that marriage would be the end of judgment. You were wrong. If anything, it's a new beginning, a fresh stage on which your feet are now constantly measured, not by shape alone, but by utility, grace, and, most insidiously, obedience. And the sharpest critic isn't your husband, it's his mother. She watches everything. The way you rise when guests arrive, the way you kneel to pour tea, the way you cross the threshold to light incense in the ancestral hall, and, of course, how you walk. Slower, she says one morning. You're moving too quickly. A proper wife glides, not stumbles. You didn't stumble. You just winced. Your heel was bleeding again. The winter dryness splitting the scarred tissue. You'd wrapped it carefully that morning, patted it with cotton, stitched the slipper a little looser. But she saw, and she did not approve. So you adjust. You tighten the wrapping again, the bandage slicing into a half-healed blister. You slow your steps. You smile more. Because she's testing you, and failing means shame, not just for you, but for your mother, your grandmother, every woman who worked to shape those tiny shoes on your shelf. Your husband remains kind, if distant. He speaks gently, but rarely. He listens when you recite poetry, but never offers his own. Some nights, he touches your feet, just to hold them. No passion, just reverence. Once, he whispers, "They frighten me, but I can't stop looking." You don't know if it's a compliment. Other nights, you soak them in silence, watching the water darken with herbs and old blood. You think about what the midwife said when she visited last month. Healthy enough to conceive. But if labor comes fast, she'll need help. She won't be able to stand. Historians still argue how foot binding affected childbirth. Some suggest it weakened women's hips and posture. Others say there's little evidence it harmed reproductive health. But in every debate, one thing is clear: bound feet meant dependence on others, on servants, on mothers-in-law, on him, and you've never liked needing anyone. Then one morning, the rooster hasn't even crowed before your mother-in-law throws open your chamber door. We're visiting the ancestral tombs today. It's a festival day, but you weren't warned. You dress quickly, wrapping your feet with numb hands. You reach for your everyday shoes, the ones that allow slightly more room. But she sees. No, she says, firm. Wear the red ones. They're finer. The red ones pinch. They always have. But you nod and obey. The walk is long, through fields, across narrow stone bridges, into the family's ancestral grove, where the tombs rise like hunched backs under moss and wind. Each step feels like knives. You fall behind. Your sister-in-law offers an arm. Your mother-in-law frowns. Don't coddle her, she says. She must learn. So you continue, alone. The embroidered phoenixes on your slippers darken with soil. At the tomb site, you kneel to burn offerings. The ground is uneven, and the stones bite into your knees. You focus on the incense smoke, hoping it masks your trembling. When it's time to rise, you almost can't. Your legs shake. Your feet are dead blocks of pain. Your husband steps forward, lifts you without a word. Your mother-in-law's lips tighten, but she says nothing. Back home, you collapse onto the floor as the red slippers come off. Your stockings are soaked in blood. 3 blisters have burst, and the flesh beneath is raw, pulpy, peeling. You want to cry, but your husband kneels again, washes your feet in silence, wraps them gently, places them on a padded cushion. That night, you sleep without bandages. For the first time in years, in the morning, you wake before sunrise, toes unwrapped, skin breathing. It feels scandalous, but also like a secret. You rebind them before anyone sees. Of course you do, but something has shifted. You've started to understand that the real test isn't walking, it's knowing when to pretend you can't. There's a banquet a few days later. You're asked to host. Women from neighboring families come to drink plum wine and admire the new paintings your husband bought. They greet you politely, then immediately glance at your feet. One speaks loudly. I heard your feet are smaller than Madame Lin's. Madame Lin is 3 years older and proud of her lotus shoes. You smile. Say nothing. Let her measure you with her eyes. You wear your newest slippers, pale yellow silk, gold thread, slightly more arch than before. They hurt. Of course they do. But your steps are flawless. Later, in the corridor, Madame Lin catches you alone. Do you enjoy it? She asks. You hesitate. Then say, do you? She laughs, but her eyes don't smile. That night, you look at your feet in the mirror tray. The arches are perfect. The toes curve beneath in their permanent clench. Your skin is a map of scars and calluses, but still, there is elegance, isn't there? You slide them into the display shoes on your shelf. They slip in perfectly, not a fraction too loose. That's how you know they've stopped changing. These are the feet you'll carry for the rest of your life. The wedding shoes now rest in a glass case in your chamber. Your husband had it made for you. Simple, tasteful, the kind of gesture that makes the servants whisper about romance. He must love her feet, they murmur behind sleeves. To show them off like that? But the shoes are no longer something you wear. They're a monument now. A symbol. Your feet. Meanwhile, are quieter these days. They ache less sharply. The skin is thickened into something tougher, less tender. You've adjusted your bindings to maintain the shape, but the worst of the breaking is behind you. Now comes the stillness. Still, the rituals persist. Every morning, you unwrap and rewrap, inspecting the flesh for signs of swelling or infection. You massage the arches, press gently into the curled toes. Make sure the shape hasn't dulled with time. Some women grow lazy after marriage. Their feet soften. They spread. The shoes no longer fit. You won't let that happen, especially not now, because you've been summoned to your husband's study, not alone. His mother sits there too. She gestures for you to kneel beside her and presents a lacquered tray. On it, a red silk cloth and a fresh pair of bridal slippers. They are for the wedding chamber, she says. But not yours. It takes you a moment to understand. A concubine. Your breath stills. She unfolds the slippers. They're slightly larger than yours, 4 inches, maybe more. You note the difference instantly. Too tall in the arch. Toes not curled tightly enough. Sloppy craftsmanship. You say nothing. Her family is well connected, his mother says. But she's young, untrained. She will need your guidance. Your guidance. The implication stings. You, the wife, are to shape this girl. Shape her behavior, her tone, her feet. It's your duty. Historians still argue whether wives approved of concubines or merely tolerated them. Some say managing a household of women gave wives influence. Others argue it deepened their isolation. In your case, it's neither. It's humiliation veiled in tradition. You smile, nod, and accept the tray. Later, in the women's quarters, you meet her. She bows deeply. Please instruct me, she whispers. She's younger than you were, barely 15. Her feet are only partially bound. You can tell by the way she walks, her heels barely grazing the floor. She's not used to pain yet. Her skin is smooth, unmarred. Her eyes haven't dulled. You're supposed to teach her, but you don't bind her feet. You simply show her how to wrap, how to soften the cloth with rosewater, how to tighten from the toes first, how to hold still even when the bones resist. She winces. You look away. She asks, "Does it stop hurting?" You say, "Eventually." She doesn't look convinced. Over the weeks, she begins to walk like you. Slow, silent, careful. She learns to smile through the ache, to glide instead of step. But her feet aren't suited to binding. They're too long, too firm. She'll never have a true lotus. Your sister-in-law says, "A silver, at best." You nod politely, but secretly, you're relieved, because now you've seen what the rituals do from the outside. You watch her wrap, unwrap, bleed, flinch. You remember how you did all of that once, how it consumed you. Now, you move less. You stay seated in the garden longer. You begin using a cane, not for show, but because walking without one is increasingly difficult. Your feet are shrinking inward. The bones no longer flex the way they used to. Sometimes, they cramp in your sleep, curling into themselves like fists. One night, your husband sees you limping and says nothing. But he carries you to bed. He sets your cane beside the pillow like it's part of your jewelry. And in the dark, you whisper, "Would you have married me without the slippers?" He doesn't answer. Maybe he doesn't know. Or maybe the silence is the answer. Weeks pass. The concubine is officially installed. A small ceremony. She wears your old phoenix shoes. You sit at the edge of the room. your feet tucked beneath layers of brocade. You don't cry. Later, she visits you, brings candied lotus root and a poem. She asks how long it took for your feet to fit inside the wedding shoes. You lie. Not long. She thanks you, says she hopes to be as graceful one day. You smile and say nothing, because grace has a cost, and no one ever truly tells you what it is, not until your body has paid in full. That night, you take out your mirror tray. You place your foot inside and look. The arch is perfect. The toes no longer resemble toes. The heel curves forward unnaturally. It is beautiful. It is monstrous. It is yours. The seasons pass in silence, broken only by the shuffle of silk and the creak of your cane. Autumn arrives with its brittle light and drifting leaves, and your world shrinks further. The garden feels longer now. The path from your chamber to the courtyard takes more effort. Sometimes your feet freeze mid-step, locked by cramps or stiffness. You pretend not to notice, but the maids do. One of them begins to walk half a pace behind you, just in case. You hate that, but you say nothing. Instead, you shift your focus to what you can control. Your posture, your speech, your embroidery, your slippers. You still make them. Not for yourself. Your feet have long since stopped changing, but for others, gifts for cousins, dowry tokens for village girls, a pair for your sister's wedding, stitched with mandarin ducks and silver willows, and one day, a special request. Your mother-in-law appears with a folded letter and a worn expression. My niece is being matched. She needs a teacher, she says. You're the only one I trust. So you agree, because what else is there to do? The girl arrives 2 days later, 13 years old. Her bindings have already begun, but poorly. Her arches are too low, her toes not fully turned. She walks clumsily, her slippers too loose. Her mother tried to manage it, but lacked the knowledge and the nerve. You become her tutor. You show her how to soak her feet with mugwort and chrysanthemum, how to use flat wooden strips to press the instep inward, how to turn pain into stillness. You become patient, even gentle, but inside, you ache, because teaching her is like watching your past flicker to life. The winces, the proud little smiles when the shoes finally fit, the swelling, the fevers, the mornings when she cannot stand. She looks up at you once, eyes glassy from pain. Does it mean I'll be loved? You pause. It means you'll be chosen. She nods, satisfied. You don't clarify the difference. Historians still debate whether women perpetuated foot binding more than men. It was mothers who wrapped the cloth, grandmothers who judged the shape, wives who passed down the skill. Some argue it was a woman's world of power and control, twisted as it was. Others say it was merely survival. You're no longer sure which is true, but what is true is this. Your mother-in-law now defers to you. She asks you to judge the new girls in the household, to manage their training, to prepare the younger ones for betrothal. No one walks like you, she says once. Even now. It's meant as praise, but it lands like a blade. Even now, when your ankles swell in the afternoons. Even now, when your cane thuds softly on polished floors. Even now, when your feet curl like dried leaves and your toes have long since forgotten their names. Your body remembers the pain even when the pain has dulled. That's the secret no one tells the younger girls. It doesn't stop. it just quiets. There's a moment, one winter afternoon, when you nearly fall. The floor was just a little too slick. Your slipper caught the edge of a mat. You teetered, arms flailing slightly. The maid caught you, barely. Your heart thunders, not from the near fall, but from what it would have meant. The shame, the pity, the gossip. You go back to your chamber and don't leave for the rest of the day. That evening, your husband brings you soup. He doesn't speak, just places it beside your pillow and adjusts your blanket. You don't look at him, but you wonder what he sees when he does look at you. Does he see the girl with red embroidered slippers who walked like a whisper into his house? Or the woman with tired feet and a perfect arch who no longer walks far at all? You take out your mirror tray once more. You haven't used it in weeks. Your foot sits perfectly in the silver reflection, shaped, hardened, permanent. There is no going back. You wrap them again, not out of duty this time, but habit, identity. The slippers beside your bed are your oldest pair, soft with wear. The thread is fraying, but they fit like memory. The next morning, you teach the niece how to walk with a book balanced on her head. A lotus must be upright, you say, never stiff, never rushed. She obeys. Her feet tremble, her steps wobble, but she improves, and you watch her with the same quiet pride your mother once showed you. You think about writing your mother a letter. You never thanked her, not for the pain, but for the devotion, for the precision, for carrying a tradition so heavy it reshaped generations. Maybe one day you will, but not today. You have another lesson to teach, and the garden path to cross, even if it takes twice as long. Years pass, not quickly, not slowly, but in the way silk frays, quietly, strand by strand. Your feet no longer change, but they respond to weather, to time, to the weight of every step you still must take. The arch has stiffened, the skin is coarse. You walk only short distances now, and always with a cane. It's lacquered, carved with plum blossoms, and was a gift from your husband after your last fall. You hated needing it. You still do. But now, it is part of your silhouette. People recognize you by the soft tap of your cane echoing against the tiles. You take fewer visitors these days. Most of the young girls in the house have been married off or sent to their husbands' homes. The concubine, now a mother of two, manages the kitchen accounts and sometimes walks with you in the morning, though she has begun limping slightly from over-tight bindings. You don't tell her to loosen them. That's not your place anymore. Instead, you notice the changes in your own balance. Your knees ache. Your ankles feel less like joints and more like hinges made of old rope. When you rise from your chair, it takes a moment longer. No one says anything, but they all watch you with that soft, pitying glance that makes you want to throw something. So, you practice again. The shuffle, the gliding walk. You do it in the early morning when the courtyard is still cloaked in mist and no one can see how much effort it takes. You tell yourself a lotus never limps, but one day, you do. Your foot catches on a stone you've passed 100 times. You lurch forward. This time, you don't fall, but your pride shatters like porcelain. That night, you soak your feet longer than usual. The skin along your big toe has cracked again. It bleeds slowly, darkly. You watch the water turn pink, then red. You sit in silence, the steam rising around your face, and think about the first time this happened, decades ago, when your mother wept into a towel and whispered that this was just the beginning. She was right. You never told her that. Historians still argue, sir, whether elderly women with bound feet continued the ritual into old age, or whether they eventually let it go. Some say the bindings became looser, more symbolic than functional. Others claim many women bound their feet until the day they died, terrified of undoing a lifetime of shape and sacrifice. You've loosened yours slightly, but only slightly. The pain of change, after so many years, would be worse than the ache you already know. There's a chair in the courtyard now, placed near the plum tree, where you sit every afternoon. You sip chrysanthemum tea and embroider slippers, not for yourself anymore, but for display. Your needle moves slower. Your vision isn't what it used to be, but the rhythm calms you. One afternoon, a servant brings your great niece to visit. She's maybe 7, bright-eyed, legs covered in bruises from climbing fig trees. She skips across the courtyard, her feet wide and strong and utterly unbound. You stare, not in horror, not in envy, just in wonder. She plops down beside you, eyes wide. Are your feet really small? She asks. Smaller than this? She holds out her palm. You laugh. The sound surprises even you. Smaller? Can I see them? You hesitate. But then, slowly, you pull up your robe, untie the softest pair of slippers you still wear, and unwrap your feet. The cloth peels away like bark from an old tree. Your foot, when revealed, is something between sculpture and relic, curling inward, skin a map of decades, toenails like slivers of wax. She blinks, tilts her head. Does it hurt? You look down. Flex, just slightly. Feel the usual tightness, the familiar pull. No, you say. But it did. She nods, as if that makes sense, then asks, why? A question no one has asked you in years. You think about answers, beauty, marriage, tradition, power. You think about your mother's trembling hands, the mirror tray, the blood, the slippers, the silence. You look at the little girl's feet, strong, unbound, covered in dust, and say simply, because we thought we had to. She doesn't press, just shrugs and skips off again, chasing a butterfly into the bamboo grove. You watch her go, and for the first time in a long while, you don't feel entirely sure whether you should be proud or ashamed. That night, you rewrap your feet, looser than usual. The cloth slips more easily, and the skin beneath breathes just a little. You sit in bed, holding your cane, listening to the night wind rattle the paper lanterns outside. You whisper to the dark, I did what I was told, and for once, the silence doesn't feel like judgment. It feels like understanding. They call them the unruly ones, the girls who say no. It begins as whispers, then rumors, then sharp-tongued warnings behind fans. She refused to bind. Her mother let her run wild. She'll never marry, not properly, but you've lived long enough to know how whispers travel. You hear about one girl from a village across the river who refused the cloth altogether. Her father is a merchant who studied in Shanghai and came back full of strange ideas. He told the neighbors, feet are for walking, not decoration. And just like that, his daughter kept hers whole. She wears leather boots, walks like a man, climbs hills, laughs loudly. You've never seen her, but you picture her often. Then, one evening, your niece tells you something quietly over a game of xiangqi. A girl from town ran away before her binding started. You raise an eyebrow. Where to? No one knows. She smiles. They say she boarded a ship dressed like a boy. A wild tale, surely exaggerated. But the image clings to your mind like old perfume. Historians still debate how many women resisted foot binding and how many actually escaped it. Some say the numbers are small, fewer than believed. Others suggest a quiet rebellion was always present, hidden beneath veils of obedience and carefully folded silks. You remember one girl from your youth, Mei Yun, who used to cry every time her bindings were done. Her feet were broad and stubborn, like her spirit. One day, she stopped coming to lessons. You were told she had been sent away, but you never saw her again. What if she escaped? What if you could have? These are thoughts you only allow yourself when the courtyard is empty and your slippers have been removed. You rest your curled feet on a pillow and run your fingers along the scars. There are stories of women unbinding late in life, when the shape no longer mattered, when the threat of matchmaking had passed, and their bones were too tired to protest. But unbinding is its own pain. Muscles long atrophied, bones misshapen, skin thinned. Your sister-in-law tried it once, on a dare. She lasted 3 days before crawling back to her wrappings, crying from the ache. Better the pain I know, she said, than the new one I can't bear. You never tried, but now, on cool nights, you loosen the cloth just enough to let air whisper through. A scandal, 20 years ago, a secret now. No one dares scold you anymore, not even your mother-in-law, who has grown frail and quiet herself. You sit with her sometimes in the garden. She no longer comments on your gait or your slippers. Sometimes she says nothing at all. One afternoon, she looks at you over a teacup and murmurs, "Do you think it was worth it?" You know what she means. You sip your tea slowly. The chrysanthemum petals float on the surface like pale regrets. "I don't know," you say, "but I didn't know there was a choice." She nods. You never speak of it again. In town, reformers are beginning to speak publicly. Missionaries show photographs of bound feet at schools and sermons. Foreigners publish articles. The newspapers call the practice barbaric, medieval, inhuman. You resent them, not because they're wrong, but because they arrived too late. You walk through the village one morning and see a poster nailed to the wall near the herbalist's shop. A foot drawn with labels, natural, unbound, strong. A boy reads it aloud to his sister Tao, who laughs and stomps her wide foot proudly on the stone. You clutch your cane harder. It's not jealousy, not exactly. It's the aching weight of seeing a door that was never open to you now, left swinging wide for others. And the quiet question that echoes afterward, would you have walked through it? You sit by the mirror tray again. This time, you don't place your foot inside. You simply look at the tray, at your reflection, hovering above the curved silver. Not a girl, not a bride, not even a wife, just a woman, with stories written into her bones. The tray reflects your face, lined, calm. You whisper to the silver, maybe not for me, but maybe for the next one. Then, for the first time in your life, you leave the cloth off overnight. You sleep without wrapping. You dream of a girl running barefoot through a muddy path, her hair loose, her laugh rising like a bird from a cage. She doesn't look back, and she doesn't need to. They come with cameras, not with ribbons, not with betrothal gifts or trays of candied lotus root, but with leather shoes, tall hats, and tripods like mechanical spiders. Foreigners, missionaries, reformers. They arrive in your town like a seasonal illness, curious, persistent, oddly polite. They want to document your pain. At first, they ask to speak with scholars and doctors. Then they want photographs of women with bound feet. They claim it's for awareness, for education, for the good of China. They promise to show the world what was done to girls like you. You do not volunteer, but your neighbor does. She's younger than you by 10 years, and proud of her golden lotus. She wears her smallest slippers and sits upright while they photograph her. They measure her feet, carefully, clinically. They ask if it hurts. She smiles and says, "Not anymore." You hear later that the photo appears in a foreign journal, titled Cruel Customs of the Orient. She's mortified. They said it was beautiful. She weeps. They said I was graceful, but in the photo, her foot is described like a specimen, a deformity, something alien. You don't laugh. You just tighten your slippers. Still, the visits increase. Now it's not just foreigners. Local reformers begin to speak out too. School teachers. Young men with spectacles and government pamphlets. They visit homes and urge mothers not to bind their daughters. They distribute flyers with slogans like "natural feet," "natural strength," and "unbind the nation." You receive one under your door. Your husband reads it, folds it, and tucks it into the drawer beside your slippers. He says nothing, but something has shifted. At the next village wedding, you notice the bride's feet are only loosely bound. Her shoes are larger, her steps quicker. She dances, even. The older women whisper, "How improper." They say, you watch her spin, laughing, her arms outstretched. Improper, yes, but also free. Historians still argue whether the anti-foot binding campaigns worked quickly or slowly. Some say the change came like a wave. Others say it was more like erosion, quiet, steady, until the foundations crumbled. You see it in your own family. Your younger niece refuses binding outright. She says she wants to attend school, learn French, travel. Her mother nearly faints. You do not object. Another relative, only 5, asks to try on your shoes. You shake your head. No. You tell her gently. You won't need these. She frowns. But yours are so pretty. They hurt, you say. They always hurt. That, finally, silences her. You place your shoes back on the shelf and close the cabinet. For the first time, you lock it. Weeks later, you receive a visitor, another reformer, this time a Chinese woman in crisp linen. She bows and speaks slowly, clearly, as if rehearsed. "I am gathering testimonies," she says. "Would you share your experience?" You stare at her, surprised. She isn't condemning you. She isn't taking photographs. She just wants your words. You say no, but after she leaves, you write a letter, not for her, for yourself. You begin, "I was 5 when my mother first soaked the cloth in warm water." You write about the tray, the blood, the slippers, the mirror, about the cane, the concubine, the poster, about how your feet were broken before you even knew what love felt like, and how, somehow, that was called love too. You do not send the letter. You fold it, gently, and place it in the drawer beside your old wedding slippers. Some truths are not for strangers. Some are for daughters who haven't been born yet. One morning, you walk to the temple for the New Year prayers. It's the first time you've gone alone in months. The path is familiar, but longer now. Your cane taps against the stones in steady rhythm. You wear your second loosest slippers, the ones with faded plum blossoms, and carry your offerings in a cloth pouch. At the temple gate, a girl runs past you barefoot, laughing. Her mother chases after her, not with scolding, but with laughter of her own. You stop walking, just for a moment, and then, with great care, you reach into your sleeve and remove your bindings. No one sees you. You place them inside the offering bowl. They are clean, neatly folded. The cloth still smells faintly of rose oil and salt. You whisper a prayer, not for yourself, but for the last girl who will ever wear shoes like yours. Then you step into the temple, unbound and free. Unbound, you walk slower but lighter. Each step is strange, as though you're learning to balance on new legs. Your feet don't quite know what to do with freedom. They ache in unfamiliar places. The arch resists contact with the ground, tender and unused to pressure. The curled toes, long dormant, twitch like seeds remembering spring. But you keep walking. The temple smells of incense and burnt orange peel. You bow, make your offerings, and sit on a worn wooden bench where the sunlight touches your hands. You do not pray for beauty. You do not pray for marriage. You pray for something wordless, soft, warm, hidden behind years of silence and rose-scented cloth. When you return home that evening, your slippers are still where you left them, tidy, beautiful, pointless. You sit on the bed, unroll fresh bandages, and hesitate. Your fingers curl around the linen, then loosen. You place the cloth back in the drawer. You sleep that night with your feet uncovered. The blanket grazes your skin like a question. Your dreams are quiet. The next day, no one notices. You still walk with care, cane in hand, slippers slightly looser than usual, in a house of women trained not to ask. Your silence is respected. Only the concubine eyes you with curiosity. One evening, she asks, "Have you changed your wrapping?" You pause. A little. She nods, says nothing more. Later that week, you see her soaking her feet longer than usual, gently flexing her big toe beneath the water. A small rebellion. You do not mention it. The world around you seems to shift ever so slightly. A merchant's wife you know shows off her daughter's new health slippers. Wide, soft, designed for girls with unbound feet. The embroidery is still there, but the shape is different, roomier, almost defiant. You run your fingers along the sole. "These are good," you say. The mother looks surprised, then relieved. At the marketplace, girls now walk briskly, with straight backs and loud footsteps. You hear laughter instead of shuffles, the click of boots, not the whisper of silk. It is unnerving. It is miraculous. And yet, you feel like a ghost. The generation that bound, that stitched, that bled into their socks. It's fading. You see it in the eyes of young women who wince at your cane, but never ask why it's needed. They don't know. Not really. Some of them call foot binding a myth. Some call it shameful. Some call it your fault. Historians today still debate who bears responsibility. The men who desired, the women who enforced, the culture that praised obedience over movement. You've stopped trying to answer. Instead, you keep the mirror tray in your drawer, beside your old slippers and that unsent letter. You no longer unwrap it. You no longer need to look. Your feet will never be whole, but they are yours. One evening, your husband, older now, slower too, sits beside you in the garden. You both watch the moon rise over the tiled roof. He glances down at your feet. You are barefoot. He says, gently, "You used to glide. I used to bleed," you say. He nods. He reaches for your hand, not out of passion, not out of duty, but simply because it's what people do when they have grown old together. When silence is deeper than speech, the cicadas sing, the tea cools, the breeze stirs your robe. He says, "I didn't know how much it hurt." You smile, not unkindly. No one did. That was the point. The next morning, a village girl arrives at your gate. She's 12, bright-eyed. She asks to see your famous shoes. You invite her in. You show her the cabinet. You open it. You let her hold a pair of your smallest slippers, pale yellow with stitched plum blossoms, the sole barely the length of a chopstick. She gasps. "You walked in these?" You smile. "I did." She shakes her head. "But why?" You tell her. "Because I believed it would make me beautiful, and I believed beauty would make me powerful." Did it? You pause. Look her in the eye. No. She hands the shoes back carefully, as if they might crumble. "They're still very pretty." Yes. You agree. Pretty things are often the ones that hurt the most. She leaves. You close the cabinet. And you think, not with bitterness, not with regret, but with the calm of someone who has lived through an entire world that no longer exists. You think, let them forget. Let them walk freely. Let these shoes become artifacts. Let this pain end with me. Unbinding should be a freedom, but it feels like a second breaking. When you first begin to leave the cloth off entirely, your feet rebel. The arches, long forced into impossible curves, now strain with each step. Your toes, fused and numb for decades, begin to tingle. Not in the pleasant way blood returns to a limb, but in the searing, electric jolt of nerves waking up after too long a sleep. You try walking across the garden without bindings. Just once. You nearly collapse. The pain lances up and through your ankles, sharp and deep, as if your bones have forgotten their shape, which, in truth, they have. You spend the rest of the day seated, both feet elevated on cushions, wrapped only in soft muslin, barely able to hold back tears. You whisper, "What did you expect?" Historians still debate whether unbinding later in life was advisable. Some say it improved circulation, reduced the risk of infection. Others argue it caused greater damage, collapsed arches, twisted knees, chronic falls. There was no medical guidance, only guesswork and the testimony of women too ashamed to speak openly. You're not ashamed, but you're tired. The next morning, you do what so many women before you did. You rewrap, looser than before, not for beauty, for survival. It's strange, this partial return to a ritual you once hoped to leave behind. You thought the end would be definitive, a clean break. But, like most things in your life, it's a slow unraveling. So you compromise. You bind in the mornings, just enough to keep the shape steady. You unbind at night, letting your feet breathe beneath the moonlight. The air on your skin feels like forgiveness. Your cane remains by your bed. But now, you use it not just to support yourself, but to walk farther than before. You visit the temple more often, the tea shop, The old friend who married late and never bound her feet, and who once envied your slippers, but now envies nothing. One afternoon, she serves you osmanthus cakes and tells you, "My granddaughter wears shoes bigger than her head. I love it." You laugh. "Mine asked if she could ride a bicycle." She gasps. "And what did you say?" "I said yes." You both burst into laughter. It hurts your sides, but it feels good. You begin sharing more of your story, not with everyone, and never in a loud voice, but with those who ask gently. Young women, granddaughters, sometimes even their husbands. You show them your shoes. If they ask, you do not show them your feet. That is still yours. There's a rumor that the government will outlaw binding entirely, not just discourage it, but ban it. Officials have begun visiting households, checking children's feet, finding families who continue the practice. In the city, women wear wide boots and walk to work in factories and shops. You hear someone say, "It's the end of the golden lotus." You look down at your cane, your feet. You think, "Good," but you don't say it aloud, because you remember what it cost you to become that symbol, the rituals, the blood, the way your father's guests used to glance under the tablecloth just to catch a glimpse of your embroidered toe, the way your husband's hands trembled the first time he unwrapped your feet, the silence that always followed. Now, your feet are simply feet again. Painful, misshapen, imperfect, but real. At night, you soak them in warm water with crushed ginger and camphor leaves. The steam rises around your ankles. You massage the joints. You speak softly to them as if they're an old friend who finally returned after many years. "I'm sorry," you whisper once. You don't even realize you've said it aloud. One evening, your granddaughter tiptoes into your room. She's 5, barefoot, trailing a red silk ribbon she found in the drawer. "Can you show me how to wrap it?" You freeze, then smile, and gently, carefully, you take the ribbon from her. You wrap it, not around her foot, but around her wrist. A simple bow. "There," you say. "That's how you wear it." She beams. Later, your daughter thanks you for not indulging the old ways. You shake your head. If she knew what they were, she wouldn't ask. The next day, you open the cabinet of your slippers. You remove one pair, the oldest, the smallest, the pair you wore at your wedding. You hold them in your lap. You study the shape, the arch, the impossible curve. You think of everything you lost to make your feet fit inside them. And then, without ceremony, you set them aside and close the door. You no longer need a monument. You have yourself. Some women are remembered for their beauty, others for their words. You suspect you'll be remembered for your shoes. Years from now, someone will open that old lacquered cabinet, maybe a great-granddaughter or a curious museum clerk, and they'll find your collection 30 pairs, all preserved, silk faded to tea-stained golds, embroidery threads soft with time, soles stiff and curled like dry bark. They'll marvel at how small they are. They'll ask, "How did anyone walk in these?" They won't understand that the answer is, you didn't. You performed. Because walking was never the point. It was gliding, floating, disguising the pain so thoroughly that even you began to believe the illusion. Now, those shoes are relics. No one wears them. They are set on shelves, behind glass, or stitched into textbooks under captions like "outdated beauty standards" or "historical oppression of women." You suppose they're not wrong? You don't flinch when the reform is finally declared official. The announcement is posted at the temple gate. All foot binding is hereby prohibited by law. All girls must remain unbound. Violators will be reported. You read it twice, not because you doubt it, but because the words feel like thunder in a quiet room. You remember your mother's face the first time she bound you. You remember her eyes, not cruel, not cold, but tired, as if she already knew she was passing down something unbearable, as if she wished she didn't have to. She never had a choice. But now, you do. So when the local officials come door to door, checking for signs of binding in young girls, you offer them tea. You show them your grandchildren, barefoot, bold, busy with school books and skipping ropes. You say, "No one here binds anymore." And you mean it. Historians will debate how effective the ban was. In some places, they say, the practice crept underground. In others, it vanished almost overnight, as if women had just been waiting for permission to stop. In your village, it dies slowly, with ceremony and awkward pauses. The shoemakers begin crafting whiter soles. Embroiderers are retrained. Matchmakers shift their focus to other virtues, schooling, family connections, quiet voices. No one mentions feet anymore. Your slippers remain in the cabinet, untouched, until one spring, your granddaughter comes to you with a box. She's been asked to bring something from the old days to school. She wants to show a piece of history. "Can I take one pair?" she asks, gently. You hesitate, not because you mind her sharing, but because you're afraid they'll laugh, that your pain will become a curiosity, that your life will be reduced to a footnote. Still, you say yes. She chooses a pair with blue cranes stitched along the sides, worn but elegant. You help her wrap them in cloth. "Will you tell them what they are?" you ask. She nods. "I'll say they were beautiful, but they hurt." That night, you feel something loosen inside you, as if the cloth you've worn for decades has finally begun to unravel at the soul, not just the skin. Later, you sit alone with a fresh pair of slippers you'll never wear. You stitch without reason now, just for the rhythm, the memory. Each thread passes through your fingers like a sigh. You no longer bind your feet. You no longer pretend not to limp. You let the pain come when it wants, and you don't fight it. You no longer have to. The younger women in the house walk boldly. Their feet slap the floors with confidence. Some even run, outrageous, glorious, loud. You don't stop them. You bless them. Once, you whisper to your reflection, "I broke so they don't have to." You believe it. You believe it with the weight of every scar. One evening, you bring out the old mirror tray. You clean it carefully, polishing the silver until it gleams. But you don't use it for your foot. You set a bowl of tea upon it. You place a flower in the center. You bow your head in silence, not for mourning, but for release. This is your offering, to the part of you that was shaped and bound and silenced, and to the part that walked anyway. You've stopped counting how many years have passed since the cloth last touched your feet. There's a freedom in forgetting, in waking without routine, in slipping on loose house shoes without ceremony. Your cane still waits by the door, but now it feels less like a lifeline and more like an old friend, reliable, but not in charge. Sometimes you walk through the garden unaided, slowly, carefully, but on your own. One morning, you pass by a group of children chasing each other between the camphor trees, barefoot, wild, shouting, A little girl falls, scrapes her knee, then bursts into laughter. You watch, stunned, as she jumps up and sprints again, uncaring. She catches you watching. She runs over, eyes sparkling. Are you the lady with the tiny shoes? You smile. I used to be. Can I see them? You take her to the cabinet. She gasps when you open the doors. The slippers are more than objects to her. They're fairy tale relics. She touches them with reverence, her small fingers brushing the embroidered cranes and plum blossoms. They're so little, she whispers. Were your feet really that small? They were made to be, you answer. She stares, confused. Made to be? You take a breath? Kneel slowly. Your knees crack as they bend, and meet her eyes. Once, people believed small feet made a girl beautiful, so we made them small. But it hurt, right? You nod. It always hurt. She frowns. I wouldn't do that. I hope you never have to. She hugs you before running back to her friends. Her feet slap the stones with wild abandon. You sit for a long time after she leaves. The cabinet is still open. The slippers still gleam faintly, but they feel different now. Lighter. Somehow. Later, your granddaughter returns from school. She shows you a charcoal sketch she made of your crane slippers, drawn carefully from memory. They want to hang it in the classroom, she says. You nod. Tell them it's from a woman who walked a painful path. Should I say you regret it? You pause. The word regret tastes bitter and unfinished. No, you say. Tell them I endured it, and that now they don't have to. Historians might one day debate whether foot binding was wholly evil or simply complicated, whether it was driven by men or upheld by women, whether it was a symptom of control or a strange form of power. You know it was all of that, and none of it. It was a life. Your life. That night, you sit with the slippers in your lap, running your fingers over the gold thread. You think of your mother's hands, your grandmother's hands. You think of the weight of generations passed down, not through words, but through cloth and blood. You whisper, it ends here, and you mean it. The next morning, you gather all the slippers, gently, respectfully, and place them in a wooden chest, one by one. You tie a silk ribbon around the box and write a note, for memory, not for imitation. You donate them to the village school. The teacher cries. She promises to display them with care. We'll tell the truth, she says. All of it. You nod. You walk home lighter. In your room, the cabinet stands empty. For the first time in your life, you have nothing to bind you, and the space where the slippers once were, it fills with light. You rarely walk far now, but you walk freely. The world has changed. You feel it in the rhythm of footsteps on the street outside, firm, even, unapologetic. Girls stride past your window with strong backs and wide shoes, sometimes in trousers, sometimes with hair cropped short. They carry books, not dowries, laughter, not silence. You are no longer the model of grace they aspire to become. You are the story they're taught to remember and not repeat. And you are strangely at peace with that. Your family treats you gently, not out of pity, but out of recognition. Your daughter-in-law asks your opinion before she disciplines the children. Your grandson wheels you into the courtyard in the late afternoons, where you watch the sun slide down behind the rooftops like an old friend saying goodbye. Sometimes, the village women still visit, not to bind feet or trade slipper patterns, but to talk, to share stories, to remember. You sit in a circle, hands curled around porcelain cups, and speak softly of a time when pain was measured in inches and silence stitched into satin. One widow confesses, "I still bind at night, just a little. I can't sleep otherwise." Another admits, "I unwrapped mine 10 years ago. They still ache, though." You nod. Everyone does. There's a quiet bond among you, those who endured, those who escaped, and those who simply lived through it. You are part of something fading. One evening, a young teacher visits your home. She brings students, polite, curious, full of questions. They want to interview you for a project. You invite them inside. You show them the empty cabinet, the folded cloth, the mirror tray, polished to a soft gleam. You unwrap your feet, slowly, carefully, and let them see, not to shock, not to shame, to teach. One girl looks pale, one looks fascinated, one bites her lip and says, "It's like your body became a story." You smile. It did, but stories can end. They ask what you would say to the girls of today. You think, then you say, "Your feet will take you farther than beauty ever could. Don't let anyone make you forget that." They write it down as if it matters. Maybe it does. That night, you lie in bed and listen to the soft rustle of wind in the trees. You imagine the footsteps of all the girls who came after you, whole, strong, free, walking across a bridge you helped build with every painful step. And finally, you let go. Let your body relax now. The story is over. You can release the images from your mind. Tiny embroidered slippers, moonlit gardens, long braids wrapped in silk, and the whisper of cloth being tied too tight. You did not have to walk that path, but you witnessed it. You felt the weight of tradition, the ache of beauty, the quiet power of survival. Now, as the candle in your imagination flickers low, picture the girl you once followed through this tale, older now, resting her wrapped feet on a cushion, a cup of tea in hand, the air still and warm around her. She has nothing left to prove, no more guests to impress, no more cloth to tie. Her feet may be broken, but her voice is not. Let her fall asleep now. Let her rest. Finally, in a world that no longer demands that kind of sacrifice. And you, breathe slowly. Inhale, like the scent of chrysanthemum steam. Exhale, like the unraveling of linen in the quiet dusk. Your breath is soft, your limbs heavy, your mind still. There is nothing more to bind you, no roles to play, no steps to perform. You are whole, and the night is gentle. Sleep well. Dear listener, sleep deeply. Sleep free. End of script. Sweet dreams.